Hare Krishna, welcome back. It has been a long time. Somehow or another, I finished up to 2019. That was my last talk. And then I just lost my drive to finish it off the last, just finish the last 5 years. And, just life events getting in the way, whatever. But I would like to just finish it. It's something I started, so I might as well go ahead and finish it. So in my last talk, we were at the end of 2019. So we had come to the end of a decade. And in previous talks, when I came to the end of a decade, I tried to do like a small, overview of, what happened in the decade, both in the world and, I'm just looking I was checking if my microphone is connected. Looking back over 10 years and what was going on during that time in the world, also within our society. So I will start off with that, a kind of decade review in the years from 2010 to 2019-20. It is considered by some historians as like a preliminary turning point in history. So it's an interesting decade. Mostly it's been dubbed the social media decade. It started before that, all the Facebook, Twitter, and so many others that was launched before this decade, but during the 2010s, as they call it, they just became firmly integrated into global culture. And I'm just realizing that I didn't, I don't know, I haven't done it for a while, so I'm a bit spaced out, but I did not offer my respects to you or to Srila Prabhupada. So, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Samaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Bacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskacha Desatarani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinda Vanchakopatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhvevita Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Yeah, we shouldn't begin to do anything without those prayers, so apologize for that. So the decade, that massive, this is when this phenomena, social media, it just became firmly integrated into the global culture. And, with the massive online media, it propelled quite dramatic social change, both for good and for bad. And, most significantly, it gave a platform for just anyone and everyone to express every variety of opinion. So the voices of discontent, started being shouted out by the keyboard warriors. So, we became bombarded with angry, rebellious politics and especially identity conflict. And that just became the new normal. And so this was the new power, that could bring millions of people together around the globe, in pursuit of various common objectives. And so this decade especially, with social media fueled many mass protests, movements during this time, people realizing the power of it. And it was a, you know, very, very big game changer in human society globally. So this, you know, this powerful tool, it could be used, you know, in very helpful ways and constructive ways, but it could also be very dangerous, very destructive individually, socially, and politically. So, you know, we're just becoming aware of that in this decade, you know, that these platforms, they transformed the internet from, like, you know, prior to that, a sort of a part-time convenience, but then it, you know, became an intrinsic aspect of daily activity for most everyone all over the world, to the point that its absence of it would, you know, just be truly unthinkable. And, you know, I'm hashing over these things, you know, just as a reminder, you know, because often change, it happens gradually, and we just tend to go with the times and often don't notice how things are changing, how our lives are changing or being changed for us. You know, now, when I look back over this decade, I'm just amazed to see how my own life has changed, how much time I spend online, and, you know, the things that I do, the ways I go about doing things, you know, and I look out my window here in Mayapur, which used to be this very remote area of just rice paddies, and I see, you know, the rickshawwallas and the maids and everyone on their phones and on these social media platforms, you know, and who would have dreamed of this? This happened so fast. And, you know, that everyone is now connected to everywhere. And, you know, if we were told this a few decades ago, it would sound like science fiction, you know, so, you know, it's just good to explore and to be aware of how things are changing and what impact that is having on our own, on people, on governments, on ourselves, on our own spiritual lives, on our sadhana. We have to always be examining what is happening. And I mean, personally, I know very little about politics. I'm just not, I don't really go there. I scan the news channels very quickly just to see if anything important happened. But, you know, even I can see the profound political implications of this mass social media, that people, you know, with their specific agendas, or those who previously had no voice, you know, can now reach millions, you know, so, you know, it can be a great thing or a disastrous thing, but we saw that this vast power, in this decade, it became, you know, the means to rally support for many causes, especially social and economic inequality. That really became the focus of the decade. And early on in the decade, you know, when it was just starting to use the social media, it fueled a variety of, you know, different things like the Occupy Wall Street protests. Those were about, you know, they were condemning income inequality and a failing financial system. And, you know, through the social media, we started to see, whoa, this is a super powerful tool, you know, and then soon after that, when there were riots that broke out after a policeman shot and killed an unarmed black teenager and then was acquitted. So then this social media hashtag, Black Lives Matter, this created, a whole new social phenomena, and it cemented the growing role of social media in modern day activist movements. And then, the next one was the Me Too movement. That was some famous Hollywood producer was accused of abuse by dozens of women, and in the aftermath of that, of those revelations, millions of people came forward to express solidarity with the accusers and shared their own experiences with sexual assault and harassment and sexism, especially in the workplace. And so there was this widespread media coverage of this Me Too. And it was very powerful. It led to the resignation or firing of many prominent figures, accused of misconduct. So, this growing way to make an impact, it fueled other social media phenomena like, cancel culture. This arose during this decade. And that's a really, at least from what I know of it, that individuals who were thought to have acted or spoken in an unacceptable manner, they just were canceled, just ostracized, shunned, fired. It was a pretty scary practice. If you don't like somebody, you just cancel them. And it was happening in many ways. It has a chilling effect, let's say, on public discourse. And it went on and on. There's a lot of stuff that happened in this decade. This wokeism, also became another social media fueled phenomena, which was often causing massive divisiveness, and just increasing the conservative liberal divide, and in the same way, the rights of the LGBTQ, I think I got that right. That was a major focus. And in many countries, the world passed laws legitimizing same-sex marriage. So these are just, examples, how change happens and how social media really drove this decade. And, I'm bringing up here mostly the initial, maybe sort of negative aspects, but now maybe I want to fast forward just a few years into the next decade and say that although, ISKCON devotees, maybe they're a bit slow to jump on board using social media, but what has transpired in just a few years is absolutely amazing. Many, many devotees, both within and outside of the mission, they've orchestrated just remarkable spiritual transformations, leveraging social media platforms, to spread Krishna consciousness with many, many varieties of digital outreach. It has revolutionized how spiritual education is delivered. And I'm just amazed to see that there's so many varieties of devotee outreach. There's talk shows, podcasts, courses, virtual temple experience, talks on vegetarianism, drug-free living, youth engagement, health and wellness, ecological awareness, and I've seen, devotees many devotees, have 50,000, 100,000 followers. I mean, this is inconceivable. You think of our preaching in the past, knocking on one door at a time. This is major. I see some devotees that they'll put up a lecture, and in a couple of days, thousands of people have listened. And, this is building all sorts of online communities. And it's clear now that transformation can truly flourish in virtual environments. And so it seems part of Mahaprabhu's plan to speed up, getting the message to every town and village. And, it's quite remarkable, quite remarkable. Anyway, to finish up with a decade, I'm taking a long time to do this, but, it just goes on. The scourge of terrorism continuing in the world, Brexit, big change in Europe, Donald Trump, which I'm not going to talk about, the Russian-Ukrainian war, massive refugee crisis in Europe, and furious debate over migration, and gun violence, especially, really in America, just off the charts. There were, in this decade, dozens, not one, dozens of horrifying episodes of gun violence against school children. Whew. And just increasing numbers of attacks driven by, views that are considered racist or homophobic or anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic views, just endless anti. Whew. And all of this discord and change in human society made it a decade of increased uncertainty and insecurity. Historians say already that this decade changed the world more than any time in history. That is amazing, in thousands of years. And that never in history, in the history of the human race, have so many people been on the move. Of course, that will change in the beginning of the next decade. We'll get there. I don't know if there was much good news. It seemed like Kali Yuga heating up, but, there are good signs. There were more and more interest in yoga. That's continuing, and the veganism and ecological activism. Some good things, people waking up more to what's going on around them and seeking solutions. And, the Avengers, they ushered in a decade of superhero blockbusters. I can't say whether that's a good or bad thing, but it definitely shows the need in human society for heroes. We need heroes. So anyway, why am I going on and on about this stuff? How is it relevant? It's not very spiritual, not necessarily inspiring. We all know that social, political, economic changes and battles, they're always going on every decade. There's nothing really new happening. Just different varieties of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. The dry stool, the wet stool, the chewing the chewed. And that's all certainly true. But still, we are part of this world, and we are often not as aloof as we might like to think ourselves. We're also very much affected by what is going on. personally, institutionally, and especially in our outreach attempts. For many of us, our lives are changing as much as everyone else. Social media has had a massive impact on ISKCON and each of us in both good and bad ways. As a preaching society, if we want to be relevant, which means, we have to be aware of what people are going through, their needs, their interests, their concerns. And, we also need to learn how to best take advantage of the new ways of connecting. Actually, if you look at our acharyas, we see, it's very interesting to see how each of them developed different strategies for spreading Krishna consciousness according to the times that they lived in. It's said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so successful. One of the reasons he was so successful was because of his acute awareness of the times, socially, politically, philosophically. So, we need to keep abreast of things. And also to be aware that in these kind of times of change and discontent and turmoil, people do often begin to, are more open to reevaluating their lives and their worldviews. And that means it's a great time to preach if we know how to be relevant. And in this decade, I would say it seems to me that the second generation have risen, become much more visible during this time by starting their own ways to really make a mark in sharing Krishna consciousness through, seminars, tours, kirtans, yoga, and they really are finding ways to connect to Westerners. So that's a very positive and wonderful thing to see. But as far as social media, the struggles and the discord that was going on in the broader world, it seemed to play out pretty much in the same way within our own society. It gave rise to many voices of discontent. And, perhaps those who may have been feeling isolated or marginalized or hurt by someone in the institution, finally they could vent their frustrations. And so there was really a tremendous increase in posts expressing, angry or frustrated or conflicting opinions. And, a new breed of devotee keyboard warriors was born. And, thus arguments and accusations over, so many issues ensued, conservative and liberal views and mistrust of authority, child abuse, book changes, guru issues, you name it. And as it does and did in the outside world, in the same way, it causes a lot of uncertainty and confusion and doubt, But, it seems like in this decade began, a time of sort of unrestricted Vaishnava aparadh. The frequent use of harsh speech and, nasty accusations, it just became normalized. And many things that were said or are said, continue to be said, I don't think many of us would speak the same way to a person's face. You know, it's really become the coward's way of addressing issues. And I mean, no doubt, there are so many issues that need attention, and that is always going to go on in any society. It's never going to go away. But the way that we approach issues, it's going to determine whether we wither or we grow individually and collectively. And frankly, I have been very disappointed, you know, to see the lack of mature dialogue, the lack of communication skills, lack of compassion, and even just, you know, the lack of human decency, you know. So I don't know. You know, I'm surprised that devotees don't have more fear. I mean, we may feel like, oh, I hate that guy, or I can't stand this or that, but I mean, we all have different ways of seeing things. But you know, I'm surprised that there isn't more fear, at least, of making offense. You know, the entire Chaitanya Bhagavat, it's just story after story, explaining the consequences of Vaishnava aparadh. Now, I know that's something that's used to silence people. Oh, you can't say anything. No, you know, that doesn't mean we don't deal with issues and problems, but we can't just take the way, you know, follow the ways of the non-devotees, you know, barking at each other. We have a philosophy that has to be applied practically. And of course, you know, I can hear somebody saying, well, you know, that's only Vaishnava aparadh. That's if somebody's really a Vaishnava, you know, and I don't think this person is really a Vaishnava, so I have no fear. And, but this is discussed a few times in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, that the devotees from Kalinagram, and they came to Puri, 3 times they asked, who is a Vaishnava? And each year, Mahaprabhu gave a little bit different definition. But, you know, his first response was, anyone who's chanting the holy name. So, you know, at least we have to try. This person's chanting Hare Krishna. This person is trying to follow. You know, let's be careful, at least try to be Vaishnavas. To be a Vaishnava, that is no small thing, no easy thing. But, you know, Srila Prabhupada said a Vaishnava, by definition, is always a gentleman and gentlewoman, you know. So, you know, in any case, there's often not much we can do about these online wars, you know, other than, you know, work on ourselves. Change the discourse by changing ourselves, how we talk, how we address others, how we solve problems, and especially what we allow ourselves to listen to. And, you know, because people, you look out in the world, my God, people really need what we have, what we've been given by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. And yet so much time is wasted within our own ranks with internal squabbles. I'm not pointing a finger here. I'm just as bad as everybody else, but I'm trying to think about it, trying to, you know, see the consequences. You feel the consequences. You know, if we're not feeling ecstasy when we chant Hare Krishna, Krishnadas Kaviraj says that's because of offenses. Offenses to the holy name, offenses to Vaishnavas. So, you know, if we're not really feeling it, then we have to look, you know, we have to look at our own hearts, you know, because, you know, all these internal squabbles, you know, it shows that many of us remain neophytes, sadly, which is, you know, a great hindrance to Mahaprabhu's mission. And I'm absolutely certain that Srila Prabhupada would not be pleased with the amount of time, wasted in useless keyboard battles. So anyway, this has become a time for everyone where we have to make new choices. What can we use in the service, and maybe what not, and how much is healthy, and how to maintain a proper Vaishnava spirit of, kindness and compassion, love, well, even just kindness. Let's not even go to love, it's a long way. Amidst all these polarizing views. But I'm focusing on the negative that arose more, during this time. But I do want to say, let's, fast forward just a few years. And, of course, there are many devotees who do not enter into these online battles, who are too busy serving, and who always show exemplary Vaishnava behavior, and who are taking advantage of these tools and using them in remarkable ways to spread Krishna consciousness. Many dedicated devotees continue, full steam ahead to spread Krishna consciousness. And during these years, there's been a big increase in book distribution and a huge increase in the popularity of kirtan. And definitely there's more and more chanting going on. So that's certainly a great thing. Yoga outreach is growing, India is exploding with new projects, and there is much to be happy about. So now I want to move on to 2020, which is also a historic year in which COVID altered the world. As I had done in previous years, I left Mayapur during winter time to avoid breathing problems. And I went to New Govardhan Farm in Australia. And so this is around the time when the COVID virus broke out in Wuhan, China, and started spreading to other countries by, late March. I think it was then declared a pandemic. Now, we started hearing about it in Australia, but, we felt distant from it, and, some general concern, but we had no idea how it was all going to affect us, But I got back to Mayapur late in, I think, late January, early February of 2020. And as far as I remember, there was a Gaur Purnima festival, but smaller due to, what was happening with COVID. Less foreigners coming. But the lockdown, rules started, I think, around the end of March. I mean, when I heard about it, I thought, what? It's impossible. How are Indians going to cooperate with these restrictions? I mean, the social distancing in India. Do you know how Indian people in general, they just really like to pack up close together. But, I was surprised they really did it, And of course, initially we were told it would be, a few weeks, but, continuing on, and with different phases and various kinds of curfews, all through the summer. And of course, we all know the whole world was immersed in confusion and fear, and of course, tremendous controversy over the whole thing. And even in Mayapur, there are widely varying views among devotees. Some didn't want to follow the rules, and others were very strict about it. And, for myself, nothing much really changed. I just spent more time at home. I had, because of increasing health issues, I had already been, spending increasingly watching the temple programs online. It just made life a lot easier with health issues. So I didn't feel so too disturbed by what was going on until my very dear and very old friend, Ramadevi, became sick. I didn't know it at the time, but a number of brahmacharis had already had COVID, but they were keeping things quiet. They just didn't want people to get, all the devotees to start freaking out. So there was concern, but not panic, Now, to give a little background, Ramadevi had been undergoing chemotherapy in Calcutta for a tumor in her head. And it was thought that it could maybe be dealt with, that she could come through with it. She had had another bout of cancer some years before and conquered it. But when the pandemic broke out, all of the cancer patients were just sent home with chemo tablets and steroids, because their immune systems were, down. So they would be the first, if there's any virus, they would just immediately get it. So Ramadevi came back home to Mayapur, and she had linked up with a new devotee from America who was really into putting her onto a strict, nature cure regime. And, she seemed really enthusiastic to beat the cancer in this way. And at that time, she, although previously it had seemed like she might leave her body or, but at this time, she became pretty active, and she got very fired up to design some new deity outfits. And so many devotees were visiting her in her home and, started working on this project with her. And, she seemed to be doing pretty well. Now later, I realized that the use of steroids, it often makes one highly active and tends to mask what is actually happening in the body. And so this was what was happening with Ramadevi. And I was really concerned for her, knowing that her immune system was down, all these devotees coming to her house, and she wasn't wearing a mask or anything. And, I thought she should be more careful. And we argued about it, but, Ramadevi is a stubborn Scottish girl. Anyway, she came down with a cold. And after a day, she called me and she wanted to borrow my nebulizing machine. And I thought, wait a minute, so this is not okay. How has this happened in one day that she needs to use a nebulizer, So of course, I'm not going to get into the whole story, but suffice to say that she became very ill very quickly. And not many realized, and even don't know even to this day, that Rama had COVID. People thought she's sick because of the tumor. But, because it was before we had a lot of information about COVID, so it wasn't so clear to us that, what was going on. So as the days went by, her oxygen levels were dropping, and she went into like a state of chaos where she was very uncooperative and difficult to deal with. And this is hypoxia. The lack of oxygen to the brain can have very negative effect. It can cause anger and confusion and anxiety, agitation, and, impaired judgment. And so that was all happening to her. And her main caregiver, Ram Vijay, he just had to stop devotees from coming over. It was just, she was just in such a state, and it was just, not nice what was going on. And so just a few devotees were allowed in. And it was a very disturbing experience. The atmosphere was just not what you would want when someone's nearing death. And it was really hard to know what to do. And I have to say that Ram Vijay, he was a saint of patience and tolerance in caring for her, because 24/7 she had to be watched. And, we were pretty much at our wits' end, not knowing what to do to assist her, because things were just going from bad to worse. So one night, I had a message from an old friend I hadn't been in touch with for decades, but she just sent some unsolicited advice that perhaps we should try using a BPAP machine to help her breathing. And I didn't even know what that was, but I thought I should mention it to Ramvi, and he said, "Oh, that's interesting," because I was just thinking about the possibility of using that this morning. So we thought, well, maybe this is Krishna's message, a message from Krishna, so we should do it. We should try and get one of these machines. But, now it's full-on lockdown, and it's difficult to go anywhere or do anything. And to make a long story short, Ramvi just did magic to make it happen that very day. He found out where such a machine was available, and he got permission from the police to go to Calcutta, and he found a doctor who would instruct him by phone how to set up the machine and how to use it. So by the afternoon, he was back in Mayapur and setting it up for Ramadevi. And it was amazing to see that within a short time, she relaxed, she was breathing better, and finally, she was peaceful. And so I asked her if she wanted me to read, and she nodded. She couldn't speak because of the machine, but she was enthusiastic. I could see in her eyes, like, Rama's back. And I know that her favorite subject is Giriraj, so I found the section in Shivaram Swami's books where he gives this very elaborate and beautiful description of Govardhan Leela. So, during that reading, suddenly, really everything changed. The chaos was just absolutely over. And the environment, it became really transcendentally surcharged. And everything just felt right. It felt joyful. It was a remarkable experience, and I was so happy. I felt happy. And Rama also looked that way. She gave me meaningful, conscious, and loving looks. So, at that point, we weren't necessarily thinking she was leaving us. Maybe the machine would help her, and maybe she could get better. We just didn't know. But I read for a long, long time, and meanwhile, Ram Vijay got, some very much needed rest. He had been a full-on caretaker mode for, just days, weeks actually. And so I read for a long time, and then, started, just softly chanting japa and holding her hand, and she was so peaceful. And it was just a joyful experience. And, but however, during this time, I became more and more aware that I was really feeling sick. I mean, getting more and more feeling sick. But I just knew I can't pay attention to this. I have to push it away, push these thoughts away, and just be present and just be here and just be with her, whatever's going on in my body. And so, around midnight, Ramvi woke, and he saw that I didn't look very good. And he said, maybe you should go home and get some rest. So I was like, yeah, I think so. And then he would take over. So, I made it home, and I crashed immediately. And around 3:30 a.m., I got the call. And Ramvi was sobbing, she's gone. So I rushed back, and Ramvi Jai was just feeling so bad because he had nodded off sitting next to her, holding her hand. And, suddenly he kind of realized that the BPAP machine wasn't making noise anymore. And so he thought it was a machine, and then, looking at it, and then he realized, oh, she's gone, and he was feeling sad about that. But I really knew that this was just the way it was meant to be, and that many times people leave peacefully when others are just out of the room. And I just knew everything was extremely auspicious. It was a lived experience. I felt it so strongly, and it was glorious. It's not just some idea or theory. I really experienced. It was so clear to me how auspicious this was. And of course the word spread, and devotees came over. Those who were, we weren't supposed to really meet together, but people came anyway to help and prepare her and get everything ready for cremation. And, usually all these things and these legalities, they take a lot of time. And what to speak of, it was lockdown, so I was feeling more and more ill, and I knew I've got to go home, I've got to lay down. Until it's time for this procession, it could be hours, to go to the Ganga. So, my daughter called when it was time, and it was very, very short. It was amazing. I've never seen it happen like that. It was just like boom, boom. Permission were given, and everything was ready. And my daughter knew that I was feeling really ill, so she said, maybe don't go in the procession, but take the scooter, and then you can meet us down there. So I did that. And I can't tell you, driving down that road to the Ganga, how strange and eerie it felt, driving all alone. There's just like nobody around and no sounds because it's lockdown. So, absolutely no one in sight, and silence. And it was the rainy season and muddy, so it was very difficult for me to drive the scooter down to the Ganga. And I was just feeling more and more sick, and I was just shocked that I got there and no one was there. Where could they possibly be? What am I going to do? I felt like I was going to pass out. But, I saw, there was a staircase that I, really hard, I climbed up, and it's a staircase where you can look over the Ganga, and I'm looking around, and I could see when I got to the top that, smoke rising from a distant place, which was just close to the road. They didn't bring her down all the way because of the mud and, the rain and whatever. So, somehow I made it back there, and, the funeral pyre was blazing. And there were 20 or 30 devotees, trying to social distance, And it all happened incredibly fast, but in a most beautiful way. You know, so again, you may be wondering, why am I telling this? I'm talking so much, taking so much time to tell this story. And, oh, there's an alarm there to turn off. It's because there were many lessons learned on this journey with my dear friend. And you know, we read and we listen to classes and we theorize about everything. But you know, how does that all pan out in life, in true life experiences? These are life experiences that make the philosophy realize, that make it a lived experience, that, you know, so in a sense, you know, these are important stories, meaningful and faith-building. So, you know, for me, up to this time, I had lost already some very dear friends, Sunita, Rasagya, Vilasini, a number of good friends. But I hadn't been with them during their last days, and I hadn't been living near them even at the time of their departure. So this was a profound experience for me. I had been close to, with Ramadevi for since, you know, the late 70s, you know, in England, France, Vrindavan, Mayapur, many different experiences, you know, and I felt very close with her. So it was life-altering to watch a dear friend depart and to see how Krishna reciprocates, was reciprocating in her life. You know, we talk so much about the temporary nature of this world and how we're not this body, you know, but facing that reality, that lived experience, is something quite different than theorizing about it or just reading the slokas, you know. And, you know, of course, part of my purpose in this series is to take the opportunity to glorify devotees who, you know, are maybe not the biggest devotees that, you know, you've heard about, but there are so many that were really the backbone of our society, who were the committed foot soldiers that made so much possible. And Ramadevi was one of them. And so I want to say a bit about her. You know, she did not have an easy life. She had many struggles, and yet she always remained committed and dedicated to serving the devotees, Srila Prabhupada, and the deities. And she was deeply loved by many, many devotees. You know, Ramadevi was from Scotland. She was one of the first devotees to join there. And throughout her years in Krishna consciousness, she served in the UK and South Africa and Holland and Vrindavan. She was, you know, a really excellent seamstress and a perfectionist in that area. And she did many years of deity seva. She was a wonderful cook. She was an ashram teacher at one time, and you know, she was pretty much good at whatever she did. She was an unofficial midwife throughout all her years, helping many devotee babies come into this world, which is really a big deal. And eventually she went back to school to officially become a midwife. Now, I don't remember when she came to Mayapur, maybe the late 90s and early 2000s. And prior, she had worked as a midwife in the Middle East for some time. So she'd learned a lot, and she was very good at it. And when she first arrived in Mayapur, she had this strong desire to help the village ladies, the pregnant village ladies. And so she bravely purchased a scooter, and all alone, she started visiting the local villages to assist the pregnant mothers. And she just, within days, she picked up enough Bengali words to communicate, the basic things. And it was radical what she was doing. And people loved her. The village people just loved her for it. Who cares about them? Who comes to visit them, And she became known in the villages and even in the hospitals nearby. They called her Dr. Rama. And she was, at this time in Mayapur, there really was very little, as far as medical facilities. You had any problems, you had to go to Calcutta. But, with this growing community, there's constantly medical issues and, sickness and things that need attention. So Rama Devi became the de facto nurse. And so she was always on call to help others when they needed it. I can think of many times she was at my daughter's bedside when she was sick. And I remember they were constructing, behind our apartment building, they were constructing a new apartment building. And one of the workers fell from the roof, 3 stories, And I saw it out my window, somebody just falling down. And, immediately just hysteria ensued. Nobody knew what to do. So I just quickly called Rama Devi, and within a minute, she was there, and she is pushing her way through the gawking crowds, and she's yelling, don't touch him, don't move him, don't move him. And she's so strong, and in an instant, she just totally took charge and was barking out orders. And she got some men to, quickly make a bamboo stretcher, and she tied this man onto it, in a way to support his neck and his back. And, the so-called ambulance came, which was way too small. And so they had to lay the stretcher over the top of the seats. And he, his nose was almost like touching the ceiling. And then, of course, Rama Devi just jumps into the ambulance, and off they, sped. And, the doctors at the hospital, they were impressed. They said that, she probably saved his life. And, if he had been moved wrongly, that he probably would have been paralyzed, So, that was Rama. She was always ready, to jump in there and to help others. I'm somebody, I really admire that, because, I always stand back at a distance and don't want to get involved. And, somebody, she just had that remarkable nature, that she would jump in and she would make relationships with everyone in the course of it all, And this was especially so when she became involved in making Didi outfits. I mean, mainly she made the night outfits for the Lord. And in doing so, she just loved to bring people together to serve. And that, I think, was her special quality. She was a bridge builder, a community builder. And the more, the merrier. With the Didi outfits and festival planning. She just wanted everyone to be involved, to bring everyone together and serve, and she was fantastic at that. And after any, festival or whatever, she had how many devotees were involved, how many different nationalities, and she, it was very beautiful how she would keep track like that. And she had the capacity to draw everyone in, young, especially kids, young and old, because, she was fun and she was enthusiastic and she had a wicked sense of humor. And, nowadays, a lot of Didi outfits and festival preparations, we just buy everything, we hire someone, and, there's nothing wrong with it. But, in those days, devotees, it's the way that you become very attached to the deities and to each other, through personally making outfits and designing things and working together to make something wonderful happen. That's bhakti. And so with Ramadevi, you could always count on her when some service needed to be done or someone needed help, Yet, what many people don't know is that Ramadevi struggled in her own life. She struggled emotionally. She struggled with sadhana. She had a lot of disappointment in her life. She had 3 failed marriages. She had no children, and really that's the only thing she ever really wanted was just to have a kid. And you imagine one after another she's delivering children for other people, and afterwards I see often she would, cry a little. It's not hers. And so that never happened. And these things could really get her down. But she always kept serving. And, I was with her on more than one occasion when she was just feeling like she just wanted to jump in the Ganga and end it all. And, she would be feeling really, really down. But then she would get a call from someone who needed her or something about an outfit that needed to be done, and off she would go. So, I bring this up because it's an important lesson that perfection in life is not always that you're perfect at everything and that you're doing everything perfectly. But, it's that in the face of adversity, in the face of very, very difficult things, one just keeps serving and keeps helping others. And that was Ramadevi. And so I saw in practical ways how Krishna reciprocated with her dedication. I think these are important things to note. That's why I'm going on about it. For all of us to know that Krishna sees our struggle and that he cares and that he's arranging everything for us to come back to him. And I saw how Krishna arranged for Ramadevi for the support she needed. Rama had a turbulent relationship with her mother. But despite that, when her mother was at last stages of her life, she jumped through hoops to bring her mother to Mayapur. It was very difficult to bring her there to spend her last days. It was very difficult, but she did it. It was, and her mother received the highest benediction of dying in the Dham. But her mother's departure, it also inadvertently provided her with the money that she would need later when she got her cancer diagnosis. And, because she just served all her life, and she didn't really have any savings, and she didn't have any close family. But Krishna arranged that she would have what she needed. And also, when one has cancer or any chronic illness, apart from funds, you need a lot of help. And there's so much that has to be done. Doctor's visits, medicines, chemo, diets, appointments, and, and all of it when you're just feeling very ill. So she had no family to do this. But Krishna arranged for her that Ram Vijay, he became inspired to be her dedicated caregiver It's not his job. It's not what he normally does, ever. But throughout this long and arduous ordeal, right up to the end, he just became dedicated to take care of her. Now, he's a young man, a community member that he became close to Ramadevi when she helped deliver she delivered their first child. And so, you know, this service, this kind of service, this caregiving service, it requires a lot of sacrifice and patience and dedication. And even many family members would not be able to do it, or be willing to do it, or have the ability to do it. But Ram Vijay, despite his own family duties and his own services, he fully dedicated himself to help her in every way possible, in a very caring and very sensitive manner. And sometimes, you know, because he had to be strong, and he could do that. You know, Rama could sometimes be hard to, you know, she's a very strong person too. So what I saw is that this was just certainly Krishna's gift to her. Because, you know, many devotees, they were puzzled, you know, how or why is Ram Vijay doing this? And the only practical answer is that Krishna inspired him to do so and gave him the ability to do it, you know. And he became like the son that she never had. And he took incredibly good care of her throughout the whole cancer ordeal, and right to the very end, doing the cremation ceremonies and all. And, well, by the way, one devotee filmed those last rites. It was tastefully done. And I recommend you see it on Facebook. And you can see for yourself. There's nothing morbid about it. It's just transcendently beautiful and wonderful. And, you know, her desire to leave her body in Mayapur was fulfilled by the Lord. And it was just encouraging. It's encouraging to see how Krishna takes care when someone tries their best to give themselves to him. And I want to add something here as a side note. I need to take a drink. Oh, this is... because it's a wonderful thing that I found out during this time. So many years ago, maybe the mid-'80s, I think, I was staying at the Manor in England for some time, and I became extremely ill. And I was just lying in the Brahmacharini quarters, sort of withering away. And suddenly, you know, a god sister named Astasaki, who I wasn't close with, you know, I wasn't really in touch with her, but, you know, suddenly she came into my room where I was staying, and she just saw how ill I looked, and she immediately, she got someone to come and pick me up and carry me to her car, and she took me to her house, and had a doctor come over to look at me, and he took a blood test, and, you know, within a few hours they had an ambulance there, and they rushed me to the hospital. And, you know, I had a very serious case of pneumonia. Note to devotees, don't ignore sick devotees, because the same thing happened to me in the 70s in Paris, where I nearly died of jaundice just laying in my room. So pay attention, you know, to the devotees when they get sick. Anyway, I'm bringing this up now because during Ramadevi's illness, we made a WhatsApp group for her friends and her god sisters around the world who wanted to keep informed on, what was happening with her. So Asta Saki was one of those devotees, and she also was the one who suggested the BPAP, and, the one that took me to the hospital many years ago. So I was regularly giving reports to everyone about Ramadeva's health, and around that time, Asta Saki messaged me privately and told me something that was just shocking and remarkable. And I'm going to read her message. Let's see. I don't think, this is Asta Saki talking to me, I don't think I ever told you, but when you were sick at the manor long ago, I didn't even know you were in England, what to speak of that you were sick at the manor. But at that time, I had a dream, and Srila Prabhupada told me to go to the manor and save you. So I went and I found you lying in a room so ill. So I took you home and I brought a doctor who immediately sent you to the special hospital in London, where you were told you were hours from leaving your body due to pneumonia. Our Srila Prabhupada has loved you and taken personal care of you, as you are such a rare and beautiful soul all your life. I can confidentially say how glorious your future is and how our Srila Prabhupada will be bringing you back into his personal service again. I love you with all my heart, Sitala, and am so honored to have served you. This is decades after this happened. So this was an absolute shock to me. And it's funny that I never actually wondered, how or why she had come into the room to help me. And so it's just inconceivable to me that this happened, that Srila Prabhupada even knows who I am, what to speak of, what is my physical condition. And, but there it is, this really happened. So how enlivening is that? How encouraging. I mean, I can't really, it's just too much for me, but really amazing. And just as a side note also, note that Asta Saki can be overly effusive in glorifying devotees, so you can take, that part, with a grain of salt. But the fact is that she was informed by Srila Prabhupada. It seems to be an undeniable fact. How encouraging is that, So again, the point of these stories is that our spiritual life is not just theory, philosophy, a practice, but it is a practical life experience. And even, we may know that we're not very advanced devotees, and we have a very long way to go. But, Srila Prabhupada, he always used to say that we are functioning on a different platform. And, that is just so true, that things may look very normal or very ordinary even, but because of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna's presence in our lives, we are on a different level. We are on a different platform. And our lives are blessed and not ordinary, even if they look and feel like they are. So anyway, I had no chance to process Ramadevi's departure at all, because after the cremation, I arrived home, I collapsed in bed and remained there for at least 2 or 3 weeks, full-blown COVID. And on the same day, my husband also fell ill, and he was rushed to the hospital because he kept saying he had heart pain. So they thought it was a heart attack, but it was COVID. He probably was feeling, there's this feeling of pressure on the chest, and he wasn't able to convey it properly. But I was pretty out of it, but I was very clear, and clear enough to state that I absolutely did not want to go out of my apartment or not be put on any machinery, and same for my husband. So our apartment, it became a hospital for a few weeks, and my daughter became our full-time nurse under the guidance of our wonderful Dr. Suki. That's a great name for a doctor, right? Dr. Suki, from our Mayapur hospital. And I have to say, Rasarani was an amazing nurse, full on care for us nonstop, IVs, medicines, washing, we were told you have to wash all your bed covers and clothes every day. It's quite a job. And the doctors from our hospital were so attentive and so kind that, it really was as good as it could get in a dire situation. My husband doesn't remember any of it. But, for those who think COVID's just the flu or something, well, it certainly felt a hell of a lot worse than a flu for me. It was touch and go for a while. But personally, I felt protected and sort of ready, for whatever might come, being in the Dham and having my beautiful Gauranga deity nearby and just listening to Chaitanya Bhagavat, for hours at a time. So again, just more practical lessons on mortality. Yeah, are we ready? What will it be like? When will we go? These questions, they become more vivid as we age. But, we made it through this time. And, once the COVID was over, I was amazed I was feeling so good. I was energetic, and sadly it was a terrible illusion brought on by the steroids that they were giving me, which, although they reduce inflammation, and they give you energy, and they also mask your symptoms. So it was like an amazing experience for me to have relief from chronic pain for a while and to have some energy for a change. But when I came off the steroids, that was it, spiraled downwards. And all the problems I had previously were now increased by, 30, 40%. And, we were hearing about long COVID, that for some people it hangs around for a while. So I thought maybe I'll get better gradually, but, it just wasn't to be. After that, I felt a lot older. And it could be depressing, but it's something I just had to get used to. Getting older, deteriorating health, that is the new normal. More pain, more fatigue, and not much that could be done about it. COVID had done its work on my body. At least that's how I see it. And I also was sadly more aware of how my own lack of ability to transcend these bodily situations, But anyway, as we all know, this pandemic, it went on, and the second and third waves, and we lost many dear devotees. And, I remember, every morning, just jumping up and looking at the phone, to check, the latest news, who's gone, who's sick, and it was a real blow for the devotees in Mayapur when Pankajanguri Prabhu left. He was very dear to many devotees here. But it was a very interesting time, like Krishna just pressed the pause button on the world, and everything just came to a halt. And it changed the way most of us lived, in good and bad ways. It changed how people communicate, how they work, how they educate, learning how to do everything remotely. Some people's lives really flourished, actually, and some really fell apart. And some people came closer to their families, and some families fell apart or lost their family. And many gained new appreciation for human connection and, realized not to take tomorrow for granted. Some found more joy at home, just walking, cooking, and appreciating the natural environment. Certainly Bhumi appreciated the break, of people not throwing all their trash around for a while, but for others, the lockdown was, like being in prison. And many people lived, totally in fear and uncertainty, but as devotees in such situations, we're so blessed to have deeper insights, to have the shelter of the holy name and the Shastra, because, well, we know that, we're all in lockdown. We have been locked for countless eons from Krishna's abode. And compared to our, this cosmic trapped condition, and also, being a soul locked within a material body, well, the present lockdown, it's not as big of a deal maybe for us, looking at the bigger picture. But for many, especially sannyasis that normally just travel constantly, it was a big shift. Quite a new thing to stay in one place. And I think a lot of people, their health improved during this time. And some devotees, felt it was like a gift. They were even calling it the coronavirus. And, because there was so much association, online sanghas, and, we just were, many people, allowed to slow down and to go deeper into chanting. And, just like when Haridas Thakur, he blessed the prisoners, just stay as you are. So, in the same way, some devotees, they actually appreciated the benefits of being in the kind of prison of lockdown. There's something really beautiful written by a 20-year-old Mayapur Vasi. Her name is Nandini. She's from China. And she wrote this, a remarkable poetic meditation about lockdown. And it shows how, a Vaishnava perceives things very, very differently than in the ordinary world. And I'm going to read it because I just think it's extraordinary. And so let me just get that. So she begins. May I be quarantined in the heart of Shri Shri Radha Madhav for the rest of eternity. May they have me locked down beneath their reddish lotus feet for the rest of eternity, keeping me safe from the virus of illusion. May they increase my immune system by giving me the vitamins of their service. This is an order from the government of my heart to the citizens of my mind during the lockdown period, which will extend until the existence of the soul. Let me use the hand wash called sincerity to cleanse me of the germs of superficiality. This should be done as many times in the day as possible for at least 20 seconds, as per the time of Lord Brahma. Let me keep great distance from the people called lust, anger, pride, and hypocrisy, who have arrived from a foreign land full of virus. Let me at least keep a 2-meter distance of anger from anyone who sneezes and coughs out harsh words against you or your devotees. Let me cover my mouth with the tissue of intelligence whenever I cough or sneeze any complaints about the service of your lordships. Let me always keep in my mouth the antivirus of your holy names and pastimes. What a beautiful vision. You know, that devotees, we are meant to see things very differently, and it can always be wonderful. Anyway, of course, you know, there was and there continues to be widely varying views outside and within our movement on the virus. What to speak of vaccines? You know, there's lots of theories and conspiracy ideas. But, you know, however you view this world crisis, whether it's human-induced or climate change or, you know, whatever, but we do know that this is a zoonotic disease, which means it's coming from animals to humans. And I don't think any of us would dispute, you know, that it is due to human beings' inappropriate, exploitative, and horrific treatment of animals. And who knows how that will increase or unfold in the future. But, you know, COVID, it did create havoc economically and politically. You know, it was sort of like we entered a phase of destabilization and intense disagreement. And that just has seemed to just keep increasing since then, you know. And as preachers, it's important for us to recognize what people are going through. People, you know, especially I'm talking of this time, you know, they're very frightened, you know, wondering what's going to become of my life, you know, especially young people. At this time, you know, for many, it really felt like the world was closing down on them. There was so much fear. And, you know, this had a very strong effect on mental health. Huge mental health issues developed during these times. So, you know, we are supposed to be there for people. And, you know, many devotees were really trying their best, you know. But unfortunately, you know, within our ranks, we, you know, tend to also get easily bewildered or fearful and divisive, you know. So, you know, some of us, you could see, we're not much more equipped to deal with crisis, you know, than the rest of the people, you know. But at least what we can all agree on, you know, the words of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He said, you should understand this essential fact. Life is temporary and filled with various kinds of miseries. Therefore, carefully take shelter of the holy name and remain always engaged in his service as your eternal occupation. And as Srila Prabhupada also, he liked to say that, you know, the material existence of our present status is full of fear of the four problems, you know, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, or as he often called it, rather than defending, fearing. Fearing gives us more trouble than the others. And we are always fearful due to our ignorance of the next problem. That's Srila Prabhupada's comment. And, you know, once someone asked Prabhupada, what does it feel like to be a pure devotee? And Prabhupada didn't skip a beat. Imagine so many things he could say, but what he said immediately, he said, fearless. That's what it feels like. Most of us have not had that experience. So, you know, as devotees, we know the real disease, you know, the material disease of avidya, ignorance, and that the real vaccine and the real cure is chanting the holy name. So, you know, rather than waste time arguing about, you know, the mundane aspects of it all, you know, best we just take the vaccine that Mahaprabhu has given us, take it very seriously. And of course, the big thing that happened during this COVID lockdown was the explosion of Zoom, of connecting online. And it was really quite remarkable to realize how easy it was to connect with hundreds of people, thousands of people, without even leaving your room. You know, it's rather grueling and expensive to travel. You travel to one temple to another where you might, you know, meet 30 or 40 devotees. So this really opened up new avenues for connecting and for preaching. I mean, for me, it seemed pretty strange to learn how to do these things. You know, talk into a camera and all, you know, how to do all these things. But, you know, it's been great, actually, and quite wonderful things have come about through it, you know, especially for me because, you know, my health deteriorating, and so for sure there will be much less travel. That will be inevitable. So it has been a remarkable tool and really wonderful opportunity to hear from many devotees around the world. And another very good thing that happened during lockdown is that Yadubar and Vishaka, well, they started the premiere of Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all. And so, because people were at home, you know, a lot of people were seeing movies a lot, you know, so tens of thousands of people watched the movie about Srila Prabhupada, and there were so many positive comments that were coming in. You know, the one that stuck out to me is that, you know, this is not a movie to watch for entertainment. This is a movie you watch for transformation. So that was a very wonderful thing, you know. So, well, I've really gone on for a long time and not gone very far, so I didn't get to the end of the years. But anyway, I will continue, to be continued on another video. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.